Hello and welcome everybody to I'll get my slides up again. Welcome again to our next next hour edition of our NDCO webinars. Thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to make sure that we have enough bandwidth here, so I'm going to put myself off on video. But thanks everyone for joining us today. The next hour, we plan to showcase the supports available for graduates with disability and also give you a bit of an insight of what's happening on the ground with graduate employment. So I think you'll find this is going to be a really good hour well spent with us. So thank you for your time. Our panel today consists of two wonderful presenters. Firstly, we have Daniel, the General Manager of JobAccess Work Focus Australia, which is the national hub for disability employment. So Daniel has been with us for a few presentations, so I hope you've jumped on the JobAccess website and had a look at some of the wonderful resources that they do have there. But Daniel's going to talk to us today about the varied supports that are available for graduates with disability, so as they transition into employment. And then we're very fortunate to also have Alana from the Queensland Public Service Commission, who's going to talk directly on graduate employment. So you'll find them both very, really engaging presenters. For those who don't know me, I'm Debbie Roscoe, and I'm the National Disability Coordination Officer for Southern Queensland. I'm fortunate to be based on traditional Gubbi land, which is located in southeast Queensland. So if you're familiar with this part of the world, the area or these lands start just north of Brisbane, travel all the way up to the beautiful Burrum River and encompass the Sunshine Coast hinterland. So Gubbi is the name of the actual language spoken by the Aboriginal people, and it means no. I'd like to extend my respects to their elders, past, present and future, for their ongoing connection with and their ongoing custodianship of this beautiful land that I get to live and work on. And I'd also like to extend those respects to whatever part of the country that you might be joining our webinar today. As always, my colleague David Swain, the NDCO for Northern Queensland, who is also our IT guru, will be joining me today to facilitate the back end and also look at our polls and also look at all the questions that I'm sure you will have lined up to have answered today by our presenters. The National Disability Coordination Program, or NDCO, as we usually call it, is funded by the Australian Government Department of Education, Skills and Employment. And our program looks to drive change so that people with disability have equitable opportunity to access, participate and achieve goals in tertiary education and then moving on to subsequent employment. 31 of us are around Australia. So whatever pocket you are in today, there will be an NDCO that you are able to connect with. Before we commence, I'd like to say thank you to the Australian Disability Clearinghouse on Education and Training, or ADCET. They also are holding a variety of webinars, really brilliant ones lately. So please jump on their website and have a look at that, and also subscribe to their newsletter. This website has valuable resources, links that are relevant for disability practitioners, teachers, students, all about inclusive practices and support within the post-secondary education sector. So I thank ADCET today for allowing us to use their webinar platform. Again, I'd just like to go through some of the accessibility today. We have Helen, who is joining us today from Bradley Reporting, and our webinar will also be recorded, and we'll have that up on our NDCO website shortly. I think we usually send you an email when that has happened, so we'll continue with that. But if you do require the closed captions, please have a look for the CC button on your toolbar. It's either going to be at the top or the bottom of your screen. And you're also able to increase the number of lines appearing in the caption box there by clicking on the small arrow to your right. So I think there's a graphic there for you. We'll also have the captioning available in the browser. So David will put that in the chat box very shortly. Just to keep you, just so you know as well, we're going to have some 3 quick poll questions. Feedback from you all has said they've been fantastic. We're able to get some real-time feedback from you all, and people enjoy seeing the results and having that interaction with us. So thank you for those, and I look forward to them coming out as well. Questions, of course, we always welcome those. David will be looking at those, but only in the Q&A tab. The chat box, you're welcome to use, interact amongst yourselves. I think that's a very good platform that we're able to use. But if you do have a question, please use the Q&A tab. That's the only one that we're going to be monitoring. If there is a question in there that you find that you particularly like, click on that and a tick will come up next to it, and that will move the question up the top of the list. So if we are running out of time, we'll ensure that question is asked first. So let's get into it. So we're pretty happy to bring this webinar to you, and thanks again for your time. We'll start off with Daniel, the General Manager of JobAccess. So he will commence. If you have been to one of our webinars before where Daniel's presented, you know that you are in for a treat. He has a wealth of hands-on experience in the disability sector and currently manages a team delivering JobAccess, which is also funded through the Australian Government. JobAccess, as I've mentioned, is a national hub for workplace employment information for people with disability, also employers and service providers. And they do drive the employment engagement team, which works with larger employers to build disability confidence and also allows them to access the talent of people with disability. Daniel will then hand it over to Alana to talk with us about the Queensland Public Service Commission graduate employment. Alana also comes to us today with a wealth of knowledge and hands-on experience working in the disability sector before leading the inclusion and diversity portfolio for the Queensland Government. One of the key projects Alana has been working on is to improve the experience of people with disability in the public sector workforce. I have heard Alana speak before, and also you will certainly enjoy hearing the valuable information that she's able to share. So let's get into it, Daniel. You ready for this? Let's see how we go at sharing screen. It's great to have you back. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Debbie, and thank you again for not butchering my surname this time around. As Debbie said, my name is Daniel Valiente Riddle, and I'm the General Manager for JobAccess. Before I start, there is a couple of things that obviously we always like to do. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet in here today. Apologies. I knew that something was going to go wrong, and there we are. So my name is Daniel Valiente Riddle, and I'm the General Manager for JobAccess. 2 things that I'd like to, first of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where you are, where I am at the moment as well, and its elders past, present, and future. I would like to also acknowledge 2 things. One is that I do not have an experience of living with disability, but I was brought up by a great aunt. My mom had to work, and I was brought up by a great aunt that lived with chronic schizophrenia. To hear continuous voices. And one of the things that I found interesting is that in the small village where I was brought up, my auntie was just my auntie. She didn't have a disability. She was just somebody that heard voices. There wasn't the fear of her schizophrenia. Kids used to come to my house. My auntie used to cook for all of us. We used to play in my house as we did in any other household. So that fear of disability is very much a constructed one. And that's what we will try to discuss a little bit as well today. So currently there are more than 1 million people with disabilities that are ready to and willing to enter the workforce. And I know that I'm preaching to the converted now. But while various studies highlight the positive impact of employing people with disabilities, they are twice as likely to be unemployed, which is a sobering thought in a country where we are looking for equality. the employment patterns are similar for graduates with disability and are also likely to get further impacted by the current COVID-19 situation, which is an extraordinary situation and extraordinary times that we are living through. So career practitioners at university and TAFE will play a vital role in closing the employment gap early on. And this is an important time. A lot of people are losing their employment, but that will also mean that we are learning a lot about flexibility of workplaces. We're talking today with David and Deb about it. And this is something that hopefully will impact positively the employment of people with disabilities. So let's look at today's agenda. So we will start with the current scenario for graduates with a disability, and obviously in here I will provide some data that is being flaunted around quite a bit, but I think that it's always important to have it at the top of mind. Next, we will discuss the range of free supports and services available through JobAccess, which can support graduates with a disability and remove those barriers to disability employment. We will then explore how people with disabilities can access funding for simple adjustment in the workplace. We will also share some specific tips and resources for career advisors to better support graduates with a disability. We will also talk about sharing information about disability, as this is an area of concern among graduates entering the workforce. Alana Bianchi then from the Queensland Public Service Commission will share her perspective in a special segment titled, What Happened If I Tell You? And then we will open up for some audience questions. Now, in past webinars, sometimes we don't get through all the questions. So two things. Happy for you guys to give us a call at JobAccess to discuss anything, but also if there are any questions that are left behind, we will take them and we can respond by email and then distribute. And these are the typical statistics that get thrown around quite a bit. So for Australian employers, disability inclusion is not just good to have, but it's an essential access to a large pool of skilled candidates. So when you consider that 1 in 5 Australians live with 1 or more disability and that this number is increasing with the aging population, over 2 million Australians of working age in between 15 and 64 have a disability. Most disabilities are in fact invisible. Around 90% of them are invisible. Consider here the number of people with mental health illness, including anxiety and depression, number that is increasing with the recent fires, with the floods, and now with the COVID-19 stresses of life. And 31% of the population have accessibility needs. So a vast majority of them do not identify as having a disability. And that is an important thing to remember, and I will talk a little bit more about later on. But remember that disability, it's merely one aspect of the person's being. It's in many ways like being short, like being tall, like having white hair, like having no hair at all, like having an accent. It is just one aspect of the person. Hence, my great auntie that brought me up, she wasn't schizophrenic. She lived with schizophrenia. So gaining higher education is generally associated with better employment outcomes and higher income. And both of these factors are key factors in attaining economic security and independence. Studies have shown that people with disabilities between 15 and 64 are less likely to study for a non-school qualification. This could be TAFE or universities or other RTOs than those without a disability. People with disability are also more likely to leave school early and to have lower levels of education. And this is further evidenced by the low enrollment rate of students with a disability in tertiary education. So these studies have been played around with the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. One of the key issues around there is that many people with disabilities may not disclose while going at university. So it may be an unreliable number, but certainly those tendencies are there. And the disparity becomes more profound when it comes to securing employment after completing the studies. The 2018 graduate outcome survey published by the Quality Indicators for Learning and Training, and I love this acronym, QUILT. Track the overall employment rate for graduates by demographics, including disability. So the survey found that the overall employment rates, full-time and part-time, for graduates with a disability was 7 percentage points lower than those without a disability. And the gap in full-time employment rates for graduates with and without disability was more than 10 percentage points. So there is a huge gap in between those students with a disability and those students without a disability in terms of gaining employment. The survey also highlighted that undergraduates with a disability were more likely to report that they were not fully using their skills or education. And that's about 44%, 45% in overall employment, in comparison to about 38% of graduates without a disability. And the main reason for this, there were no suitable jobs in the area of expertise. The employment trends for graduates of vocational education and training courses are similar. The 2018 data in this graph reflects the responses of all VET students, including students from dual sector university, TAFEs, and private RTO. So they were asked a simple question, if they were employed after training, and yes or a no. And the employment rates for graduates with disability of VET courses is 25 percentage points lower than those without a disability. So these are huge numbers, and I think that if there are questions around these, also the NDCO may want to participate in those answers. So the NDCO surveyed 220 disability employment services consultants across Australia about working with university and graduates with a disability. And these DES's consultants, because they are the frontline workers of people with disability looking for employment, have got a very important, they've got a very, very important insight on the issues faced by new graduates with a disability. So the survey highlighted barriers that DES providers considered as primary reason for the gap in employment for graduates with a disability. Some of these included employer attitude, so the lack of knowledge and skill to hire people with disabilities, and this is very consistent with other research done by the Department of Social Services, where 77% of employers fear the lack of knowledge in the recruitment of people with disabilities. Lack of early assistance, as the students are unable to register with DES providers until after they finish their full-time student study. So there is a lack of preparation while they are studying. And we know that if you graduate and you don't find employment within a period of time, it becomes harder and harder to find employment within your area of expertise. And they also cited some societal expectations. So we still remain having low expectations that people with disabilities will go into employment after completing their education. So it's time for the first poll question, and this is around the service that I'm very fortunate to be part of. And the first question, if I can take it to David, have you heard about JobAccess? And David, if that is a yes or no question, I believe.
Thanks, Daniel. It's David. Yes, it's just a simple yes or no question. I'm going to launch it to the audience now, and we'll leave it up for a little while, and then I'll let you know what the result is. So I'm launching it now. So the question is, have you heard about JobAccess, yes or no? 25% have voted.
25%.
So there's 167 people on it, and we've got 76% have voted so far.
Fantastic.
We'll just wait another couple of seconds.
This is just to gain an understanding of whether JobAccess is something that you guys are aware of. We know that throughout the DES sector, there is not a great deal of awareness sometimes, and these are the services that are going to be key to the success of people with disabilities and employment, and also for the person with a disability to know so they can self-advocate about how they can be supported and how barriers to employment can be removed.
So Daniel, 82% have heard about JobAccess and 18% haven't that are online today.
That is absolutely amazing. That is something that is fairly rare. Usually, and there it is, usually we have that the other way around. So I'm really, really pleased that people have heard about JobAccess. Now, the other problem with hearing about things is that sometimes we hear about them, but we have misconceptions of what they do. And that is something that obviously we were also discussing earlier on with David and David. So let me just run you through what JobAccess is. So let's take a look at what we do at JobAccess. So JobAccess is, as it was said before, the national hub for disability employment for people with disabilities, employers, and service providers. It is a 100% free service to employers, people with disabilities, and service providers. And we exist to help remove barriers to disability employment. That is our sole purpose. So in many ways, it's a five-pronged service, and some of these parts may be very applicable to your areas of expertise, some of them may not. But let me just run past you what actually we do as a service. So we have an advice service via phone and website. So we operate a national call service. The telephone number is 1-800-646-800. And all of this is going to be flashed on the screens a little bit towards the end of the presentation. So it's delivered by a team of frontline professionals who provide free, confidential, and expert advice. Our advisors are available to answer your questions on matters related to disability employment, or can direct you to the other supports and services available. We also have a comprehensive website with information and advice on disability employment, and I will specifically touch in our toolkit, which is a great function of our website, and I will talk about a little bit later on about that. The important part about that part of the service is that remember that they are all allied health professionals, including psychologists and occupational therapists. They are available at all times to answer your questions. And that great website is also supported by these allied health professionals. So it's great to have those tools that are automated, but it's also great to know that you can just pick up the phone, you can give us a call, and we can have a chat about anything related to the employment of people with disabilities. So we also coordinate workplace adjustments and modifications through the EAS, Employment Assistance Fund, which we will talk in greater detail in this presentation. We also run the National Disability Recruitment Coordinator, and as Debbie said, we engage with larger employers to increase their confidence in the recruitment of people with disabilities. And another two services that are not as related are the Complaint Resolution and Referral Service, which aims to improve employment, government-funded employment services for people with disabilities through a fair and impartial complaint resolution process, and the National Disability Abuse and Neglect Hotline, which is a reporting mechanism, but it's also an information mechanism to anybody that it is concerned about people with disabilities, abuse and neglect. I did wanted to talk to you also about the toolkit, as I said. So in February 2019, the Australian government launched the Employer Toolkit. The JobAccess and specifically the National Disability Recruitment Coordinator had been working on for a number of years. The toolkit is a free online resource to help employers who are keen to employ people with disabilities in their organizations, and it's designed to support all levels of disability confidence in employers, no matter whether they are hiring people with disabilities or if they are the first time that they are looking to take the next step. So there is always appropriate information in there. And it's extremely versatile resource for career practitioners as well, as it includes a wide range of videos, tips, downloadable resources they can also use when working with people with disabilities and employers and graduates with a disability. So I really encourage you to go to our website and have a look at it. The website, as it is in there, is jobaccess.gov.au. And briefly, I'd like to also touch base with you guys around the disability employment services. So this is a vital service in terms of recruiting people with disabilities as well. Over the years, Australian Disability Enterprises have supported tens of thousands of people with disabilities to join the workforce. The primary function of a DES provider is to ensure a good job fit. They're also there to ensure that both the employee and the employer receives the necessary assistance to address any disability-related issues. They're also there to remove any potential barrier that may get in the way of satisfactory work performance or hinder any job retention. These are services that try to aim for long-term employment, hence hindering job retention. It is something that they focus on. And again, not all people with disability will require support, but it's always good to know that these services are in there. Graduates with disabilities should know that these services exist, but also practitioners could be getting in touch also with those disability employment services to develop a much better relationship as well. So JobAccess can help employers develop relationship with the local providers as well if they're not sure where to start. So this service is available for all employers, big or small, and it's also a free service. So let us go to the second question, David. Do you know how the Employer Assistance Fund can support people with disabilities at work? And I believe that this one is also a yay or a nay, David?
David here. This one's a yes or a no as well. So I'm launching it now. The question being, do you know how the Employment Assistance Fund can support graduates with disability at work? So that should be launched to the audience now. And you're able to vote, a yes or a no.
We're keeping those questions really nice and simple. Yeah or nay?
Makes it a lot easier to talk to, I suppose. Absolutely.
No ambiguity.
Well, this one's it's shaping up to be a little bit more of a mixed response, though. So we've got 77% of the audience who voted. We'll leave it a little bit longer. Okay, so 80% of the audience have voted. 32% say yes and 68% say no.
And that is usually more online with what we see around the service delivery for JobAccess. And there we go, 68 to 32. This is a vital service, and it is very important for people to understand what we do through the Employment Assistance Fund, because we can do a lot more than what it is believed that we can do. So we will remove any barriers that the person with a disability may have, because the philosophy of the service is that the person doesn't have a disability, the environment is the one that should be assisted, it should be adjusted so the person with a disability can perform the duties at work. So the Employment Assistance Fund is available for people with disabilities who are about to start a job or who are currently working, and could help pay and buy related modifications and services. Now, the key in here is that there are people that are about to start work. So if there is an employer that is looking to employ somebody with a disability, and I will show the guides later on, we can go in, do an assessment of the workplace, and implement any changes that are needed before the person starts work. We can also go in if the person is developing a disability through age, or they acquire a disability for any other reasons, or if that disability is increasing in impairment. We can also go in and do assessments. We can do as many assessments as required, but it is for the individual. And I will explain how it works a little bit later on. So, and the type of adjustments that we will do is adjustments to special equipment for physical workplaces, modifications for work equipment, information and communication devices, Auslan interpreting, especially service for employers with specific learning disorders and mental health conditions, disability, deafness, and mental awareness training. So our internal research shows that about 90% of all the modifications through a DAF cost less than $10,000, and about 50% cost less than $1,000. So it is not the expense of the modifications, is knowing what modifications work best. And that's why we do individual assessment every time that we can. So how does the application process work? So you can submit, so employers, employees, service providers, the person with disability can make applications for work modifications. So they can submit it online at jobaccess.gov.au. You can have one of our agents in the phone line supporting with you with that as well, so it's fully inclusive. You can send us an email. Get in touch with us so we can start that application on your behalf. JobAccess will assess the application for eligibility of the worker, and we'll talk about eligibility a little bit later on. And JobAccess will also advise if a workplace assessment is required. If a workplace assessment is not required, JobAccess will send a form of approval for the organization to purchase modification of adjustments, and then the cost can be reimbursed by JobAccess and the Employment Assistance Fund. If a workplace assessment is needed, JobAccess will arrange a specialist. This is a no cost to the employee, to the employer, to the service provider. It is free. We tap into the National Panel of Assessors. We send on an assessor to your individual workplaces who will provide a report on what changes may be required. They will identify any barriers that may exist and find solutions to make the workplace more accessible and flexible. Then the organization can purchase again the approved modifications and have costs reimbursed by JobAccess. And as I said before, those costs are not great. 90% of all the modifications are less than $10,000. But we have modified tractors, for example, at a great cost. So we will do anything that is required so the person can continue to do the job. A couple of years back, we had this wonderful story of a person that lost an arm, and he was a saxophone player, and we did a modification so he could play the saxophone with one hand, given that that was his actual employment. Remember that we are here to help. A JobAccess advisor will manage the process and answer any queries you may have. So the eligibility for funding to make any workplace adjustments and modifications, they do have a specific criteria that applicants need to meet. So they need to work at least 20 hours per week. If they're self-employed, they need to work at least 20 hours per week and then an hourly income of at least equivalent to the national minimum wage. They need to be in a job that needs to be continued for 13 weeks or more. To be an Australian citizen or permanent resident and have an ongoing disability that has lasted or will last for at least 2 years, and disability must limit, restrict or impair your ability to work. Again, there are guidelines. Give us a call. We're happy to assist with any inquiry regarding eligibility. We want to tap onto the Employment Assistance Fund to support people as much as we can. So universities and TAFE career practitioners are one of the top sources for students to secure graduate roles. So let's look at some tips and resources that may be able to support graduates with a disability and transition into employment. So an easy way where you can start is by identifying employers that are disability confident. Review their websites and identify statements within their career or about us pages. You can also visit the JobAccess website to view our alumni. So these are organizations that have completed the partnership with the National Disability Recruitment Coordinator, which is part of JobAccess, and remain committed to workplace diversity. The JobAccess website has a wide range of tools as well, templates and free resources for supporting job seekers with a disability. You can guide students to review tips and advice on the website in preparing for the job search process. Another great service which can help employers on disability confidence is the Australian National Disability, the Australian Network on Disability, the AND. They manage also the Stepping In program, and it is a paid internship scheme matching talented university students with disability with roles in leading Australian businesses. So a great place to get in touch as well. We encourage you also to join our mailing list to receive the latest news from JobAccess. Our e-newsletter it's published once every 2 months, and it includes our current employer partnership list, and as well as a regular update on expert advice and support for people with disabilities at work. And there are also some NDCO projects that you can explore. The University Specialist Employment Partnership, which is designed to prepare and connect the university students with disability to graduate jobs. That it's a pilot program developed to deliver an on-campus employment service aimed to meet the specific needs of graduating students with disability seeking employment. And I'm sure that David or Debbie could talk about that in more detail should you have any questions. There is also the TAFE Specialist Employment Partnership offered by UCEP, which provides specialist career support for TAFE students with disabilities. And the Big Meet, it's a career fair organized by the AAGE, which is the Australian Association for Graduate Employers, which is promoted to all students from all universities in each host city across Australia. And it's been created as a result of feedback received from employers from both the private and the public sector, and it's aimed to connecting employers with disability at one major career event rather than attending several different fairs. We've got another poll question in here. Are you aware when a person with a disability is required to share information about their condition? And again, David, yay or nay?
It's David here. I believe it is, or yay or nay. I'll just stop sharing the last one though, and we'll move to poll 3. It is. So the question is, are you aware when a graduate with disability is required to share information about their condition? And there's a whole bunch of interesting points about this, isn't there? But I'll launch that poll out to the audience now, and we'll see what we think. Okay, so people are voting at the moment.
And this, I think that this question is, it's much more broad than just the sense of disclosure, and we will talk a little bit more about that later on. But it is a really interesting question, and it's also one that students with disability have raised in a number of occasions that I've presented at universities as well.
I think the key word in that is required, isn't it? So we've got 79% have voted so far, and 60% of our attendees are not of when a graduate with disability is required to share information about their condition, and 42% are aware. So I'll just share those out so everybody can review them.
Yeah, it's pretty much 59, 41.
Call it 60-40, yeah.
60-40, rounding numbers are always, David. So to create a truly inclusive workplace, we believe that employers need to feel comfortable and supported to share information about their disability should they wish to or need to. So you may have heard about the term disclosure, which is a very problematic one, given that it implies that I'm hiding some secrets, some deep-seated secret about me. So instead, we are using, we are now referring to the share of access requirement. And this is in keeping with the person-first language and putting focus on the person, not the disability. Remember my great aunt, she lives with schizophrenia. She's not schizophrenic. It's living up to that type of language. And organizations have been very successful in introducing these type of languages. So in 2015, a UK-based consultancy surveyed around 1,000 graduates with a disability in the United Kingdom to help increase the number of graduates with disability successfully applying for work. The aim was to understand why graduates with a disability are not as keen as sharing requirements with employers during the recruitment process, and to highlight what employers need to be doing to encourage openness. So 57% of the students believed it will be beneficial. 70% of the students said the most important factor is encouraging them to share what they will know, that it will be a benefit, and 8 out of 10 students were more likely to share if they were told that the employer is disability confident by their career advisor. So they are interesting numbers. An Australian survey of the Australian Association for Graduate Employers found that over 50% of the students with a disability did not intend to share the disability with the employer. Nearly 70% said no, they will not. And while 28% weren't sure what to do. This is an area where the students required a lot of guidance to begin the job seeking process. So there is no legal obligation, obviously, for an employee to share information about the disability unless it affects their ability to do the work or impact their safety or the safety of others at the workplace. In some cases, disability may not only become evident once the person is employed. Some employees may choose not to share information, and we need to respect that choice as well if there is no impact in the workplace. So some reasons to share: disability being at the core of the personal identity, adjustments required during interview or assessment process, needs to ask for workplace adjustments or flexibility, companies actively promoting disability. Most common once the person is settling into the job as well. So people that have gained employment and after their successful onboarding, they had issues around their disability. Problem with performance and team dynamics. It may be involuntary or a precautionary measure in case the disability arises on the job. But some reasons not to share, it's some fear of discrimination or stigma. Internalized stigma, well, how we feel about our disability. Privacy. Disability not related to work and no need for work-related adjustments. Short-term casual contract positions may not have a diagnosis or may not consider their condition as a disability. As I said before, 31% of Australians require some kind of accessibility, or they have accessibility needs. One in every three don't, two of every three don't consider themselves as having a disability. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, at least from JobAccess. So I would like to hand it over to Alana Bianchi from the Queensland Public Service Commission. And I will be, Alana, managing your screen. So if you can just let me know when you want me to change it, I'm happy to obey.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome everyone. And I wanted to really quickly pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we're meeting today. And they are, for me, working and living in the Quandamooka country in southeast Queensland. So thank you. And Daniel's presentation was a really nice introduction to some of what I wanted to talk about today. And in terms of the Queensland public sector, when Debbie introduced me, she said that I was leading the disability or the inclusion and diversity portfolio, and a really big piece of work for Queensland Government over the last couple of years is looking at the experience of people with disability across the sector and what we can do to improve that experience. And in terms of sharing information, we have some targets in the public sector of 8% of people with disability we'd like to see represented in the workforce in the next couple of years. We're not anywhere near that, but we make some assumptions that a big chunk of people we do have employed currently haven't shared that they have a disability for a number of different reasons, but it also probably means that there are people that aren't getting the support and accessibility requirements that they need as a result of that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today. So sorry, next slide, please, Daniel. Yep. And just the next one. That was just yeah. So just in terms of a bit of background about our the graduate programs that Queensland Government currently has in place. So just a couple of them. So there's Policy Futures is a really one of our biggest cross-sector programs. So that's not yet open, but will be soon. And Transport and Main Road, Queensland Audit Office, and Queensland Treasury have current offerings for graduates for roles in the sector. And disciplines have really varied across the requirements for what we're looking for in different programs. So Policy Futures, as I said, which is a whole cross-government one, it's all different disciplines, IT, looking at IT technical backgrounds, science degrees, computer science degrees, marketing, procurement, project management, And Queensland Treasury is around, you know, economics, finance, accounting, commerce, law, maths and statistics. So it's quite varied in each of the different programs of what we're looking for in terms of discipline. Next slide. Thanks, Jenny. So the process for us is actually through an online portal. So we have a portal which we will have the later in the slides. We'll put up the link to that portal. So it's basically in the first instance in like an expressions of interest. So people will have will be able to put in their CVs and other information around the demographics. So the areas of study, disciplines, if they have a preference for types of programs that they want to be involved in. We do have then, so that's the first point of contact. So it's all just online. We do have different processes for the selection of candidates. Now, as you can imagine, we get people in that portal from all over the world, but majority from Queensland, but large number from other states as well wanting jobs. There is a section in that portal to ask whether people have disability or not. So that's the very first option or opportunity people have to share whether they have disability. And so then we have, following on from that, we try to shortlist the thousands and thousands of people that come through. And we use a whole range of different processes for that. So we might use a video submission, we might use psychometric testing, and then assessment centres. So each of those processes is another shortlisting process. And we are very aware, particularly over the last couple of years, that we haven't always been very inclusive in those processes. It's been a bit cookie cutter in style, which has not been ideal at all. So just the next slide, Daniel, thanks. So some of the things that we have done in the last 1 to 2 years in the recruitment process itself is provide people some examples of what types of adjustments might be made through the process. Asking candidates to let us know what sorts of adjustments you might need, because we don't always know. Encouraging candidates to make contact. So make contact with a contact person for that program and discuss what those requirements are and how we can best meet them. We've conducted video interview assessments over the phone because we've certainly had really strong feedback from people who are blind that a video assessment is not ideal for them to be able to do. And we've heard individual stories of people who have just withdrawn themselves from the whole process right at the beginning because of the expectation for a video assessment. So what we've tried to do in the communication is, if there's another way of us assessing you, then we're open to discuss what that might look like. And again, we need to know what candidates need, so please tell. Thanks, Daniel, you were right on the spot. So for people who may not know, the Queensland Government has some branding, and it's around being here for Queensland. So we actually did in 2016, which feels like a long time ago now, but it wasn't really. We asked people in government to ask what the 5 reasons for being here for Queensland would be. So what did they value? So that in terms of an employment value proposition. So people wanted to be the difference. They want to be challenged. They want to be rewarded. They want to be balanced. But they want to be you. So we have really tried to push that in our communications when we want to be an inclusive workplace, and we want people to bring themselves to work. So we want people to bring their authentic self, where diversity is really embraced across the sector. And by supporting people with disability, we're actually strengthening that. So the more people we've got that can talk about openly and honestly about what their needs are, and what additional value they might bring to the organisation as a result of their disability, as opposed to that being a limitation to what they can do. It is a value. Next one, thanks, Daniel. So one of the other major parts of assessment process for graduates is assessment centres. So they can be quite intimidating. I've been along to a couple of them to help with assessments, and I've just walked away from the first time I went and thought, I don't know how someone who has disability or anxiety, you know, they're not easy to cope with. So we've actually tried to make some adjustments to those centres, thinking of, again, people with different types and diversity of people in the room, what we can do to make that experience a better experience for them. And some of the things that we've done is, again, encouraging people to tell us before the assessment what their needs are. So we can talk through and provide support during the day, but we can also do what else we might be able to do to help them, support them. So we have some examples of what we have done is printing out PowerPoint presentations, so people actually have a handout instead of an expectation of looking up on the PowerPoint. We make sure we've increased the number of breaks that are had throughout the day to alleviate some of that anxiety and give people space away from the large group aspect of the day. We actually provide quiet spaces that people are encouraged to go to if they need to, just to, again, remove themselves from the potential stresses they might be experiencing, knowing that these centres are stressful for everyone, as is every recruitment process. But of course, there's certain people with certain disability that is heightened by these environments. And we try really hard to set a comfortable and calm tone for the centre to reduce that stress. So the intensity is a little less as well, and the pace, because I think the pace used to be really, really quick, and just people just, and it's not, I guess it's about having a centre that allows people to shine, not an assessment centre that will actually inhibit what people are able to show of themselves. Next one, please, Daniel. So some other adjustments that we have made throughout assessments is providing more time for assessments. So again, if people are willing and feel safe enough to share with us that they have disability or requirements, accessibility requirements, we can make more time for them to do the online assessment. We can adjust that time for them. Discussions that are had in assessment centres, we can extend that time because often they are time limited. So we can make those adjustments for that individual for the day. We can provide alternative materials for instructions, certainly provide alternative technology for the process. You know, thinking of people who might be, in particular, people who might be blind or people who have a hearing impairment, very well could struggle with some of the things that we have in place. So we can provide the technology to support them, again, to allow them to shine and show what they have to give. And we can certainly allow people to have support and contact people throughout the process that might assist them if required. And just, you know, we talk about the assessment process for graduates and we talk about graduates, but, you know, Queensland Government is making adjustments all the time for people in the workplace. It's like any other workplace, and I think we're getting better at seeing what's available and what we should be doing for staff. And I think Daniel's discussion was really good because it's only been the last couple of years that I think we've really tried to push within Queensland Government that there's support outside of our workplaces that can help us to make the experience the best with the requirements that are needed for individuals in the workplace. So flexible work itself is pretty big. At the moment, it's even bigger. But we've actually have probably over the last 3 or 4 years, flexible work itself has been a major driver for workforce in general. So we've encouraged that flexible work, and it's really nice to see, I think, that there's been lots of shifts in people with disability just integrating into what flexible work is able to provide anyway. And again, back to Daniel's point, that I think there's a misconception that any adjustment people need might be an expensive adjustment. And apart from the fact that we've got JobAccess and funds outside of the Queensland government that can support that adjustment, more often than not, the adjustments are smaller. And one of the really easy ones is people working from home or people having different start and finish times, which doesn't cost anything, but is a great benefit and support to the person with disability. The next slide, please, Daniel. So my advice to students would be to don't be afraid to mention the disability. Disability confidence, that phrase itself, is something that's really big in the sector at the moment. People are doing what they can and working with across teams to try to increase that confidence and try to grow that confidence for hiring managers, for peers within the work teams. There's a whole range of things that are being done. It's a slow road, unfortunately, but we want people to feel confident enough in themselves in how we will respond if it's mentioned that they have disability. So the very beginning is when you register on the portal, say that you have disability, so we can make contact around any adjustments that are required. Program coordinators, again, let them know if you need adjustments. Again, we want you to show what you have on offer. We don't want to inhibit that by putting something in place as a process that's not going to allow you to do that. And adjustments will be supported wherever possible for recruitment and again for at any stage within a public service lifespan. So in terms of our Be Here for Queensland, we want people to be courageous. So tell us what you need and we can help you to get there. And the link at the bottom of the slide there is the slide that you can find the graduate portal, where you can express your interest with the CV and other bits of information. So that's all from me, and I see our timing is going well. So any questions, I guess? So Debbie, you facilitating this?
It's David here. Hi, Alana. Thanks very much for the presentation.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's my job this afternoon for the questions, and we've got 3 minutes, so I might just stick to, and we'll, as Daniel mentioned earlier in the piece, questions oftentimes we do find that we have some unanswered, but we do put them on a document and answer them and send them back out to people who registered. So don't flip on the page for it, because we'll get the answer. It'll just be a bit later. I'll try and pick something that's broad, which is difficult actually. There's a lot of really specific eligibility questions, Daniel, about JobAccess EAF. One for you, I suppose it's about the assessment centres themselves. Are the quiet spaces popular? Do people use them? The individual said they'd imagine that many people with and without disability would appreciate the quiet space.
Definitely, and I think that's in terms of my comment around flexibility, it's a bit similar. There's lots of what we can do to support people throughout their work life or in an assessment centre or any recruitment process is beneficial to anyone. So the quiet spaces it's actually something only in the last 12 months that we've tried to integrate, and we'll let people know at the beginning of the day that those quiet spaces are available. So yes, it's probably more around the individuals with disability being told beforehand that we will be providing quiet spaces to support you, if that's what will be helpful. But during the day, there's space for anyone to go to remove themselves from some of that, intense stress or what they might feel as intense stress.
And one for you, Daniel, perhaps is, Jess is a recruiter and said, I found as a recruiter, people that do tick they have a disability or require a reasonable adjustment don't know what they need. Is there a service that JobAccess provides to help people discern what adjustments might be available given their circumstances? And Jess, I apologise if I paraphrase what you wrote.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 things are in there important to remember. One is that you can just give us a call and we can provide you advice on what may be needed for a person with a disability to attend an interview. If it is about Auslan interpreting, we can provide some Auslan interpreting. There is some funding in there from government. But also, people with disabilities also have access to disability employment services. And those recruiters should be contacting those disability employment services to be able to understand what that person may need in terms of be successful during the recruitment process.
Hi, it's Deb here. I'm just going to jump in a little bit here as well. There's lots of different questions here. There was one that I saw, and David's internet is just not the best at the moment, but there was a really good one in relation to inherent requirements that I was looking. That was from Tracy Lee. Hi, Tracy Lee. And it says here, do the activities tasks undertaken at the assessment centres reflect the inherent requirements of the positions that are being applied for? Did you want to get that one, Alana? Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's I guess it varies because every role or every type of discipline and a graduate program are looking for different things, which, as I said, are quite diverse. In terms of the requirements of the inherent requirements of the job, graduate positions are much more broad than I would say other positions where you might be recruiting for. So they're looking more for attributes. They're looking more for what you can offer, how you might respond to things, more than a specific role, because graduates will go into a number of different roles. In a number of, most graduate programs have a rotation program as part of it. So they'll go to a few different agencies as part of their program. So inherent requirements of the role isn't as much of an issue in a graduate program recruitment. I hope that answers that question.
We've got lots of questions here. I might just throw one more through to you, Daniel. And as David mentioned, we will put some of these on paper and see whether we can get Daniel and Alana to answer those, and we'll send them all out to you. But there's one here for you, Daniel, just to wrap it up. And it's from Nick, and it says, to access the EAS, if a person with disability has an established relationship with an allied health provider, do they need to use the JobAccess internal panel assessors to assess their needs, or can they use the assessment provided by their existing practitioner?
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. We can use the practitioner's opinion in many ways to see if that is something that will be, the National Panel of Assessors will take that into consideration. That's the short answer for that. And in many cases, if that is the opinion of an allied health professional that is registered, we may take that into consideration as well.
Thanks for that. I'm just conscious of the time now, and we could ask a few more of these questions, but I will, I'll put them on a piece of paper and I'll send them out to you both to answer. But I just want to thank Alana and Daniel for your presentation today. Absolutely brilliant, as I expected. And also thank you to everyone who's participated to participate in the polls and the questions and the chat. There was lots of activity happening today, so we get very excited when it's very interactive and we know that you're engaging with us. Daniel, of course, I love listening to you present, and it always gives me some real inspiration, that knowing that when we all work together as a really collective unit, and then tap into all these existing expertise and services that JobAccess offers, I think we can achieve a lot. It's just brilliant. And it's good also to see that the JobAccess awareness, when we ask that poll question, is increasing all the time. So I'm pretty excited about that too. So excellent. Alana, the snapshot, brilliant. We always kind of have a bit of an idea of what we think may happen within all these assessment centres and the testing that's involved. So it's good to have, some hands-on insights into what Queensland Government is actually doing. And as you said, in the public sector, what you're doing is replicated in so many other areas. So it's really good to have that overview, and also knowing that, and what I'm pretty excited about is that disability inclusion is pretty high up there in the inclusion radar, which I think is brilliant. So thank you both for your time today. That was great. All of you that have hung around, thank you very much. If there is a burning question in the survey that will be sent to you, you have a spot to be able to do that. Also, I want to thank everyone for support of the webinars, the presenters coming on board, but also for you to take your time up during your lunch to attend today as well. We've got lots more planned, and we look forward to connecting with you then. So on behalf of Daniel, Alana, David and myself, we wish you a